There was a plague that people were terrified about, and that was herpes.
Oh, tainted love, tainted love.
The big H used to be heroin, now the big H is herpes.
It's a virus, but it goes away, but it comes back, and it's not really curable.
The media was always along for the ride of the sexual revolution, and they had been reporting the story of sexual freedom for a long time. And this was a new story for them, the story of sexual anxiety.
Well, socially, I think people are probably a lot more cautious when they hear that there's some sort of an epidemic.
Sometimes I feel love.
Try to meet someone special, you say, "Gosh, Helen, I care about you, but can I have some blood and urine so I can run some tests?"
With an estimated 1 million Americans exposed to the AIDS virus, no one can afford to take any chances.
There was no such thing as safe sex.
We do reap it in our flesh when we violate the laws of God.
It's becoming increasingly clear that AIDS can be transmitted heterosexually. Many single people are now spending more time in health clubs than bars and discos.
It's a time where you really need to find someone to get serious with.
It just was the most extraordinary difference to the 60s, where promiscuous sex was part of this idealistic notion, to the fact that, you could die from it.
You were not just having sex with that person, you were having sex with their entire sexual resume.
It definitely reduced the number of partners in my life. No question.
Have you been tested for HIV?
Who, me? No, I don't have anything to worry about. I've only slept with 3 people. Oh! Hey. Hey. Hey.
But I've slept with 5 people.
What the hell?
And I've slept with 9.
I've slept with 2.
Really? 4 over here.
3 para mí.
Stop.
I've been with 103.
Stop! Are you kidding me? 103? Now what do I do?
Get tested now. Go to freehivtest.net.
You seem to be suggesting that somehow a world in which people don't fulfill their obligations to their children, desert their marriages, don't keep to the laws, are increasingly selfish and follow their own desires and abandon all kinds of ideas of self-restraint and patience, is a better world than one where those things actually ruled, and I don't agree with you.
There's a lot of naked people and a lot of alcohol, and it's great. We meet on the beach, we get drunk, we go back to the hotel, we have casual sex, and then we go about our lives like we never met.
Drugs and people who get drunk and people who abandon their husbands and wives, it doesn't seem to me to be an improvement. And it strikes me that it's time somebody said that actually this isn't necessarily a turn for the better. People who say that they're not doing harm are almost invariably deceiving themselves.
Indeed, what they're doing?
The teenager who takes drugs and becomes mentally ill and ruins his own life and that of his parents is doing harm to other people. But at the time they do these things, they say, no, my body is sovereign. I am a completely autonomous person. I don't harm anybody else. We lie to ourselves about this all the time.
Pam Stenzel speaks to over 500,000 young people around the world every year about issues of sexuality and the importance of abstinence. In 2001, she participated in President Bush's faith-based and community initiatives held at the White House. She's been a speaker at the United Nations for the Summit on Children.
You graduated high school in 1967. 1 in 32 of your classmates would have been infected with an STD. That was the onset of the sexual revolution. If you would have graduated with me in 1982, it's 1 in 18. Today, it's 1 in 4. In fact, the Centers for Disease Control now says there is no way anyone under 24 could have sex with someone who is not a virgin and not get a disease. It is statistically impossible. So now this medical community is not asking if they're infected, they're asking what they have. And the last time I was in Washington, D.C., and we had talked about having worked with President Bush's team, well, we now have a new president, and he has decided to take away all of the money for abstinence education in our country. So it was all cut off all the funding for abstinence education. So I went to the conference where they were going to tell us, now what are we going to be teaching our kids? And at that Department of Health and Human Services said, now the curriculum says everybody gets an STD. Everybody gets one. It's no big deal. It's like the chicken pox or the flu.
You'll get over it?
There should be no shame. And so here's where we've come. In the 60s, we threw off God's standard. We said, we don't need God. We don't need him to tell us how to handle our sex lives. We can do whatever we want. And 40, pushing 50 years down the road now, we have massive infidelity, STDs, infertility. Infertility among women has risen over 500% in 10 years. A great deal because of sexually transmitted disease infection. And we're not telling our girls that the choice they make on prom night might mean they'll never be able to be mothers.
Well, and on the impact it'll have on their future marriage. And we know so much now. And you say if the kids have the facts, they can make the right moral choice in spite of the media, in spite of the peer pressure, in spite of the social acceptance of all of this immorality.
Right, I think there's a few key things. One is this. It used to be back in my day, and I grew up in the church, so I grew up going to Sunday school and church and Wednesday night prayer meeting. Every time the church was open, my family was there, so I spent a lot of time there. But in my day, back in the dark ages, here's what was said at church. God said, don't do it, thank you for coming to class. I mean, that was it. And in theory, it should be enough, right? I should be able to say to you, God said, don't do it. You don't need why. It's kind of like the parent that says, because I told you so, right?
Exactly.
You don't need to understand the why. The thing is, we have the why, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and I think it's desperately important that this generation understand why, so that they see God's law not as mean and trying to wreck their weekend, but they see it as love, and God saying, you know what, I love you so much, and I want to protect you. I want to protect your fertility. I want to protect your future marriage. I want to protect your mind.
But they don't have the experience with God to trust that pleasing God matters. So when you hear, as you have and did for years, well, nobody told me, you're out to tell them. Let me give you the facts on your choices.
Well, because the media is telling them they can do all of this, they can have multiple partners as long as they have a condom, that's fine. And the problem is that's not true. It's not even true medically. The condoms don't protect from the two major STDs we're dealing with, which are viral, herpes and human papillomavirus. Don't protect at all because they're contracted by skin contact. And human papillomavirus is a serious virus for girls and for women with cervical cancer and possibly complete infertility, if not death. And herpes might be annoying, but who wants that, you know? And so if they understood medically what was going on, I think they would say, wait a minute, I don't want to risk that. It's not worth it. And then I think the next kind of step that I'm trying to get kids to understand is that sexual discipline is something that is learned before marriage, not after. See, I think my generation had this idea that we could kind of sleep around, sow your wild oats, you know, do whatever, and then someday we'll get married, we'll flip a switch, and now we'll be able to control what we never controlled back there. And that's not working very well for my generation.
Before I started traveling and speaking full-time, I spent 9 years counseling in crisis pregnancy centers in Chicago and in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And for 9 years, I would have girls in my office daily saying, Pam, I didn't know. If someone would have told me that this is what was going to happen to me, I would have made a different choice. No one told me. I began to ask these girls in my office, what could we have said? What could someone have said to you before you made your choice that might have helped you to have made a better choice? And after 9 years, I realized that there were a lot of students out there making decisions about sex, having no idea, none, what the consequence of that choice would be. So we're going to talk about today. If you forget everything else I tell you today, and you can only remember one thing from me today, this is what I want you to hear. If you have sex outside of one permanent, monogamous, and monogamy does not mean one at a time. That means one partner who has only been with you. If you have sex outside of that context, you will pay. No one has ever had more than one partner and not paid. Today we're going to talk about the physical and the emotional consequences of sex outside of a monogamous relationship. Physical cost, you guys tell me. What do you think most teens who are having sex are afraid of? What's their biggest fear? Pregnancy is the biggest fear of teens having sex today. Doesn't make a bit of sense to me. Got a news flash for you. Pregnancy's not a disease. It's survivable. You can actually live through it. I've lived through it 3 times now. A few extra pounds here and there. It hasn't killed me yet. I'd have girls in my office for pregnancy tests scared out of their mind, waiting for the results of that test. I walk in, look at this girl, and say, your test is negative. Not pregnant. She gets this look of relief over her face like I'm off the hook, not pregnant. Thank you very much. Let me out of your office. Wait a minute. Have you been tested for syphilis, gonorrhea, herpes, chlamydia, trichomonas, vulvodynia, arthritis, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HPV, HIV? Have you been tested for that? Me? I live in Michigan. Pam, I don't live in Indiana. Sorry to those of you who live in Indiana. It's a beautiful state. Students, you know how many people have herpes now? If you are 12 or older, and I'm hoping that's most of us here. If you are 12 or older, 1 in 5 people in the U.S. over 12 is now infected with herpes. 1 out of 5. And that is not the most common STD. The number 1 STD in the United States and Canada and around the world, the most common STD is human papilloma virus, HPV. This is also a virus. What does that mean? No cure. You got it forever. You're going to give it to others. This is not only the most common STD, it is the most contagious STD we know. This is not transmitted the way HIV is transmitted. We'll talk about that in a second. Street name for human papillomavirus or HPV is genital warts. Basically warts on the genital area that need to be burned off periodically either through laser surgery or chemicals. Now, we used to think that was the only big deal. No, just get a few warts, have them burned off. This is not a problem. So we realized a few things about this virus, students. Number 1 is this. You can have the virus and you can be giving it to other partners without ever having warts. In fact, the most cancerous strains, and there are over 100 strains of this virus, the most cancerous strains don't produce warts at all. Teenagers are not infecting each other with this because they mean to. You don't mean to. You don't know you have it. Girls, if you do get warts or lesions as a result of being infected with this virus, typically, ladies, they will be on your cervix. When was the last time you saw your cervix? I had an 8th grade boy in Detroit look up at me and go, I don't know. I said, you don't have one, honey, breathe. This is not a part of your body you can see. I know when I say genital warts to students that I've got students sitting out there who've had sex who in their mind are doing this. Well, she said that wart thing and I have never seen a wart down there. I don't have that. My friend, if you've had sex or sexual contact, and I will define that in a second, and you have not been specifically tested by a doctor for the virus, and males, that's a test that costs in excess of $1,000. There's no one that's doing it. Test me, go to a doctor and say, I would like to be screened for HPV. We don't do it. We can't screen males. The test that they tried using to screen is a blood test, extremely ineffective, and could take up to 5 years before you would ever test positive. It astounds me that we have boys saying stuff like this to girls. I don't have anything. I got tested. For what? And how much did it cost you? And I sure hope it's been 5 years since you last had sex. Students, STD testing cannot tell you what you don't have. We can't tell you what you don't have. We got kids thinking they can have sex on Friday night, run to a clinic on Wednesday, and tell somebody they don't have a disease simply because they got tested. We do test girls for this. We test them through a thin prep pap test. It's a snip of the cervix. Why don't we test boys that way? You don't have one. Very good. We're now requiring every woman who's ever had sex to get a pap test yearly. If you are under the age of 24 and you've had sex, you are at highest risk and you need a pap test every 6 months without fail. A negative test, ladies, does not necessarily mean you don't have the virus. It means you don't yet have cervical cancer. HPV, guys, is a little annoying. Having warts burned off your genital area is painful, I'm sure, I'm guessing. And I would hate to have to be there when you had to tell the girl you loved and wanted to marry about every partner you had ever had. My risk of infection has nothing to do with whether you got tested or used a condom. My risk of infection has everything to do with where you've been. Guys, that might not be fun, having to tell your wife about your past, but you're going to live. Girls, this is a huge deal for you. HPV is the #1 causal agent of cervical cancer in women. We now have girls as young as 18, 19, and 20 undergoing radical hysterectomies will never have children because of invasive cervical cancer. I had a senior come up to me recently. She came up, she goes, Pam, I've got cervical cancer. Got it in the 9th grade. Which means she got the virus in the 7th or 8th. She said, I've had numerous cryosurgeries, freezes in my cervix, the cancer spread in my uterus. They're doing a hysterectomy next week, 3 weeks before she graduated. She was being tough. She said, Pam, kids are noisy, smelly, cost a lot of money, and I don't want one. Then she got a little teary. Said, I'm just trying to deal with the fact that I have to tell the man that I love and want to marry someday that if he marries me, neither will he. Is it worth this, girls? Really? Because he said he loved you? Let me quick say this. There is now a vaccine that they're making available for HPV for young women. The problem is it has to be given well before there's been any sexual contact, which is why they're talking about now giving it to girls as young as 10. And here's the other problem with this. It is basically effective, we're not sure, but basically effective for 4 out of the 100 strains of this virus. And we are not sure for how long it will remain effective. I asked some doctors, I said, well, now that you have a vaccine, are you going to stop doing Pap tests on women? And he laughed. Of course not. We will still do Pap tests on any sexually active woman. Well, why? You have a vaccine. Because it's not necessarily 100% and we don't know what's going to happen. Basically, what we're saying is this. If I said safe sex to students today, what would they say? Sure, hey, Pam, I can sleep with 18 people. I got a piece of latex. Safe. We have kids saying stuff like this to each other. Well, I've never had unprotected sex. What in the heck does that mean? Since condoms aren't safe. Never have been, never will be. The only safe sex, and safe sex exists, the only safe sex is a safe partner. Someone who has never had sex, or if they have, hear me carefully, it has been 5 years from the last time they had sex of complete abstinence, have them virally blood tested, know what they've got. The only safe sex is a safe partner. Saying no to sex will never hurt you. Once you've said yes, you've lost all guarantees. What if we didn't have AIDS and genital warts and herpes and syphilis and gonorrhea and chlamydia? What if I could give you a super condom? Sleep with 30 people, kids get desperate. What if I use 5, a bodysuit? There must be a way. Are there other reasons besides all this disease and pregnancy we might want to wait to have sex? I think so. I'm stupid enough to think sex is more than a biological act to meet a biological need. I am such an idiot, such a complete moron, that I actually think sex involves a little bit more than a few body parts touching. I am so old. I am such a dinosaur that I actually think sex involves your heart. And there is not a condom in the world that will ever protect your heart. When my daughter was in high school, she used to think she was the DJ in our vehicle. No one allowed to touch the radio in our car but my daughter. We're driving down the road, music's on loudly. She turned to me, she goes, Mom, we got to change the station. You're not going to like this song. Obviously, my daughter has heard the song. I would like to hear this song that she does not think I will appreciate. Please leave it there. Here were the exact words to this song. I am not kidding. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals. Let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. Over and over again, the whole song. You and me, baby, ain't the love songs of the new generation. That is awesome. I looked at Kara, I said, Kara, at least he's being honest. At least he didn't say, I love you, you're beautiful, I have a ring. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals. Sex means a whole heck of a lot more to me than the pigs on my farm. Sex has tremendous ability to bond. That's what it was intended to do. It was meant to be that part of me I gave to my husband, I gave to no one else. That part of him, he gave to me, he didn't give to anyone else. The one thing that would make our relationship unique when we abuse it, treat it like a recreational sport, there's a cost. When I didn't used to speak so much, I used to use duct tape, packing tape. I'd take it with me and I'd say sex is the ability to bond two people together, just like this tape. I'd take a big piece of that tape, rip it off, roll up my sleeve, and just wrap that duct tape around my arm. And it'd stick really good the first time I did that. So I don't want the tape here anymore, and I just rip it off, and pieces of my arm would come with the back of the tape. Move it on to the next person who was lucky enough to sit close and stick it to their arm. It'll stick a little. Never as good as the first time. Stick a little. Rip it off their arm. Now we got junk from their arm and my arm on the back of this tape. Move it on to the next person. Stick it there. Rip it off their arm. Now we got junk from theirs and mine. And pretty soon this tape's going to stick to nothing at all. It's got so much junk from everywhere it's been. You have sex with someone and the relationship ends. And you will take the junk from that relationship into the next, and then the next, and the next. High school kids say, yeah, but Pam, you don't get it. See, because we love each other. I mean, this is the person I'm going to spend my life with. We are never going to break up. It's going to last forever, at least until prom. How long do you think the average relationship lasts among teenagers today once they have sex, on average? 3 weeks is the average. Think you're in love? It's going to be forever? You have sex with that person, 3 weeks later, the girl down at locker 257 is looking a little more exciting, or the guy on the basketball team, because football season's way over. Write your Dear John letter, Dear Jane letter. Break up, trashing with your friends. You've heard this done. Oh, they were a jerk, but this will be better. You know, all those other boys before you, that was just sex, but I love you. And I move on to the next and the next, and pretty soon I don't have anything unique to give to you that I didn't give to everybody before you, except a few diseases I picked up along the way, and now sex is a game. It's a recreational sport. It's something we do in our towns across this country because we're bored and we couldn't think of a thing better to do. We're bored. Pam, we have sex, we're bored. Oh, there's a good reason to have sex. Unbelievable. Students, sex is the most valuable gift, one of the most valuable gifts. It is the most amazing gift of yourself that you will ever give. And if it becomes a game, if it becomes hooking up and friends with benefits, to the point today where the average number of sexual partners for people under 30 in this country is 27.2. When we get to that place, it is no longer a gift of special. It's no longer unique. It's no longer you and you only. It becomes just something I do because I couldn't think of anything better to do. That's not what it was intended to be. You deserve the best that sex and intimacy and respect would ever be offered you. Do not settle for less than that. You are worth waiting for. I know there might be some of you tonight who have had sex and you're sitting here going, well, why did I have to listen to this? And maybe you've tuned me out and you've decided not to listen. If you've had sex and you've tuned me out, I need you to tune me back in. I don't care what you did before you came in today. What I care about is what you choose to do when you leave. And you can walk out of here and say, it doesn't matter, I've already done it. Don't need to listen to you, and you certainly don't need to listen to me. Do whatever you want. And maybe up until today you've escaped some permanent physical damage. I don't know that, and neither do you. Get tested, please. If you will do nothing else, you have to. That girls especially, you need to get tested this week, again in 6 months, again in a year, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Please do that. Who's to say the next time that you decide to put this gun to your head, it doesn't go off? Who's to say that the strain of HPV you're carrying today won't kill you, but the one you get next week will? When are you going to begin to build integrity, discipline, trust? You could start today. Don't ever let anyone tell you that because you've had sex in the past means you have to keep doing it, because you don't. You choose. I had a little girl in Anchorage, Alaska. She ran right up to me. She had no personal space, right in my face. She said, Pam, I'm a recycled virgin. I said, cool. She said, when I was 15, I had sex, left me with so much pain, and I knew that I didn't want to keep getting used and dumped and used and dumped. I wanted sex to mean something. I didn't want scarred fallopian tubes. I didn't want cancer. And Pam, I made a commitment that I wouldn't have sex again until I was married. I said, sweetheart, that's so awesome. Someday when you get married, you're going to have to tell that boy what you did when you were 15. You will have to rehearse your past. But you're going to be able to look at that boy and you're going to be able to say, for the last 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, whatever it is, I have waited for you. And we're going to know what kind of damage was done because we've had some years to make sure she's okay. You can walk out of here and keep doing what you've been doing, and there is a cost at the end of that road. Or today, you can say no more. Choice is yours. Someone's going, yeah, but Pam, you don't get it. If I went to my boyfriend or girlfriend and told them I loved them, we love each other. I don't want to break up, but I don't want the sex. They'll dump me. I mean, if I want to have sex with them, it's over. Really? What's your relationship based on? It's based on sex. Want to test a relationship that's sexual? Want to find out if they love you? Do you even want to know? Got a challenge for you today. Stop. See what's left. If they love you, they will still be around. If they dump you simply because you want to have sex with them, you just learned what that was all about. And as painful as it is, students, it is a lot less painful to learn it when you're 17 than to learn it 8 years into a marriage where someone's cheated on you, dumped you, and left you with 2 kids. A lot less painful to learn it now. Don't believe me? You don't have to. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. If you're sitting here today and you've never had sex, you are a virgin, I got something I want to say to you today. And the first thing I want to say is that you are not alone. Please do not believe the lie the media has told an entire generation of students. Well, they're all doing it. They're animals. They're out of control. You are not an animal. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals. You can choose to say yes, and you can choose to say no. And thousands of teens across this nation are currently choosing to say no. CDC released stats last year that made every second I've spent on the road in 15 years worth it. We now have more virgins in high school than we have had in 15 years. This pendulum is swinging back. And finally, far more students are beginning to choose to wait. If you're sitting here today and you're a virgin, I want to say this to you in case you never hear it again. Please hear it from me. Good for you. Good for you. You have something so special and so valuable, it is worth whatever it takes to get to your marriage with no past fear or disease. It's not going to be easy.
In the last 5 years, a steep increase in chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis cases have shattered previous records. As if that's not bad enough, experts say the 2.3 million people diagnosed is likely a fraction of the actual number of people infected. We are sliding backward, declared Dr. Jonathan Merman, the Centers for Disease Control Director of Sexually Transmitted Diseases. He's talking about a 76% increase in syphilis, noting most cases are men with male partners. Chlamydia is the most common STD, with 1.7 million Americans diagnosed, nearly half of them young women between 15 and 24 years old. Gonorrhea cases increased by 67%, nearly doubling among men, and it's gonorrhea that has health experts particularly concerned. Syphilis, chlamydia, and gonorrhea are all curable with antibiotics. The problem is gonorrhea has become resistant to all but one, and experts fear it's only a matter of time before even it no longer works. We expect gonorrhea will eventually wear down our last highly effective antibiotic, and additional treatment options are urgently needed, declared the CDC's Dr. Gail Bolin, who added, "We can't let our defenses down." The CDC calls on President Trump to declare STDs a public health crisis. But evangelist Franklin Graham tweeted, "What America has is a moral crisis and a spiritual crisis." Lori Johnson, CBN News.
If you believe that saving sex for marriage is God's design, then please give the video a thumbs up.